British Airways Flight 762 has just lined up on the runway at Heathrow Airport, ready for its first flight of the day. The weather is perfect, and with experienced pilots at the controls, everything seems set for a routine flight. British Airway 762. Runway 27 left clear for takeoff, clear for takeoff. Runway 27 left British Airway 762. But an unnoticed problem is about to unfold. What seems like a small oversight will soon lead to a life-threatening emergency. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday as the aircraft speeds down the runway. Several passengers near the wings notice something strange outside their windows, something that doesn't seem quite right. What have they seen, and how will the crew react once they realize what is happening? Find out as we uncover the story of British Airways Flight 762. It's May 24, 2013. And British Airways Flight 762 is being prepared for its first flight of the day, heading to Oslo. Norway. The aircraft for this flight was an Airbus A319 built in 2001. It's a reliable jet used on short to medium-haul routes, known for its strong safety record and trusted by airlines worldwide. The previous night, during a routine weekly check, technicians opened the fan cowl doors on both engines to check the IDG oil levels. Lacking the necessary tools, they delayed the task, leaving the fan cowl doors unlatched, violating standard procedures. To make matters worse, no warning notice was placed in the cockpit, leaving the oversight unnoticed. Later that night, the technicians returned, but instead of going back to Flight 762, they accidentally serviced an Airbus A321 on a nearby stand, believing they had completed the task. They signed off the paperwork for Flight 762. The fan cowl doors, however, remained unlatched, and the IDG oil levels were below operational standards. The following morning, 2 pilots and 3 cabin crew reported for duty at 5:45 at the Operator Crew Report Center at Heathrow Airport. The pilots and cabin crew briefed separately before proceeding to the aircraft parked on stand 513 at Heathrow Terminal 5. They met on the plane about 45 minutes before takeoff. The pilots reviewed the aircraft technical log together. The captain then began preparing the flight deck, whilst the co-pilot carried out the external walk-around. During this check, the co-pilot carefully examined the aircraft's exterior, moving methodically around the plane. He inspected the landing gear for tire condition and hydraulic leaks, scanned the wings for any visible damage, and made sure that the control surfaces like the flaps and flats were clear of obstructions. He looked over the engines, ensuring that there were no signs of leaks or abnormalities. Everything appeared normal, and with no visible issues detected. The co-pilot returned to the cockpit. Pre-flight checks complete. Anything unusual on the walk-around? Nothing out of the ordinary. Everything looks good, but something was very wrong. The unsecured fanal door had gone unnoticed during the inspection. This oversight would have far-reaching consequences later in the flight. While 75 passengers were boarding, the aircraft was refueled with 600 kilograms of fuel, more than enough for the relatively short flight to Oslo. During these routine ground operations, a member of the ground handling team took photos for a training video, completely unaware that the fan cowl door doors had been left unsecured. With the routine ground operations complete, the pushback tug arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled takeoff. The driver completed his standard pre-departure inspection, walking around the aircraft in an anti-clockwise direction. As expected, he found nothing out of the ordinary after all. Ground personnel weren't trained to notice unlatched fan cowl doors. Once again, the critical issue slipped under the radar, and at 6:57, Flight 762 was pushed back from the gate, unaware of the hidden danger. The pilots taxied the aircraft toward runway 27, left in the cockpit. The 50-year-old captain had over 500 flight hours, including 6,600 on the A320 series. He had been a captain for 11 years and started his career as an engineering apprentice. The 33-year-old co-pilot had 5,400 flight hours with 4,100 on the A320. He joined the airline in 2006 and had previously flown on the Boeing 737. The first officer was in control of the flight today, while the captain acted as the pilot monitoring outside. The weather was ideal for flying light winds at 12 knots visibility over 10 kilometers, and mild, scattered clouds in the sky. The temperature was a cool 7 degrees. Perfect conditions for a routine flight. British Airways 762, runway 27. Left clear for takeoff, clear for takeoff. Runway 27 left British Airways 762 at 7:16. Flight 762 departed with the first officer at the controls, and everything seemed normal so far, but as the aircraft picked up speed, several passengers seated near the wings noticed something unusual. The fan cowl doors on both engines were flapping in the air, a flow moments later as the plane left the ground and began its climb. The unsecured doors were ripped off entirely by the force of the wind, sending debris flying into the air. Pilots of another aircraft lining up on runway 27. Left shortly after Flight 762's departure spotted debris scattered across the runway. Concerned, they quickly transmitted a pan to air traffic control, alerting them to the potential danger. British Airways 762. Another aircraft has reported debris on the runway. Can you confirm everything is normal? Debris, what could that be? I don't know. Instruments are all showing normal, while everything in the cockpit seemed normal. The aircraft was far from being in a normal state. The sudden loss of the fan cowl doors had immediate consequences. Debris from the doors struck the fuselage and wings of the aircraft, most notably puncturing the fuel metering unit's spill return pipe. This damage caused a significant fuel leak from the right engine, and engine fire could easily break out, but the pilots were completely unaware of the situation in the cabin. Several passengers on both sides of the aircraft pressed their call buttons and began shouting to attract the flight attendant's attention. The senior cabin crew member found the behavior unusual and attempted to reach the pilots using the interphone. The captain noticed the call just as the landing gear was being retracted, but busy with managing the aircraft's climb, disregarded it. Interpreting the lack of response as the pilots were busy and aware of the situation, she did not try to call again. In the meantime, the aircraft climbed through the acceleration altitude of 1100 ft. Autopilot 2 was engaged, and the first officer moved the thrust levers to the climb detent. But 1 second later, the auto thrust disengaged and the master caution alarm sounded. The first clear sign to the pilots that something was wrong. The crew quickly retracted the flaps as the aircraft accelerated to the target speed of 250 knots and continued the climb to 6 0 ft. With the flaps retracted, the crew finally had time to focus on the fault messages that had appeared earlier on the ECAM. The captain noticed that the right engine's pressure ratio gauge was blank, following the ECAM instructions he selected. N1 mode for both engines, but 4 seconds later the master caution sounded again, indicating a loss of the yellow hydraulic system. The situation rapidly escalated, and the crew now understood they were dealing with a serious emergency. The yellow hydraulic system is one of the 3 main hydraulic systems on the Airbus A319. This system powers specific aircraft components, including the nose wheel, steering, right side brakes, reverse thrust for the right engine, flaps, slats, and the operation of the cargo doors. If the primary system fails, it also serves as a backup for the landing gear. When pressure is lost in the yellow system, the Power Transfer Unit, or PTU, can transfer hydraulic pressure from another system to maintain essential functions. However, if there's a problem in the yellow system, such as a fluid leak, keeping the PTU active could cause pressure loss in the unaffected system. The captain followed standard procedures by turning off the PTU to prevent the unaffected system from pressuring the yellow system. This allowed the crew to isolate the issue and protect the rest of the aircraft's hydraulic systems from further complications, with the aircraft leveled off at 6,000 ft. The pilot looked back to visually inspect the right wing and noticed damage to the wing's leading edge. "Captain, I'm seeing some damage on the right wing. It looks like something hit it. Possibly debris. All right, we need to return to Heathrow. Pan, 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 pan. This is British Airways 762. We have an engine issue and a hydraulic system failure requesting radar vectors to return to HEO Airport. British Airways 762. Acknowledged. Radar vectors will be provided to keep you in the vicinity of Heathrow. Please advise if you require further assistance in the cabin. The senior cabin crew member noticed several passengers near the right wing were still trying to get her attention. She approached them, and they pointed out visible damage to the right engine standing in the aisle. Her view was limited, and she didn't notice the most critical detail, fuel leaking from the engine. After checking the damage, the senior cabin crew member contacted the cockpit at 7:22, 6 minutes after her initial attempt. "Captain, I've just checked the right engine, and the top looks like it's blown open. There's visible damage, understood. We're already heading back to Heathrow. We'll keep monitoring." It should I inform the passengers? Yes, make an initial PA announcement. I'll give them a further update once we've finished our checks, though. She reported the damage to the engine cowl. She hadn't mentioned the fuel leak as it wasn't visible from her position. As a result, the flight crew remained unaware of the fuel leaking from the right engine, a critical issue that would soon escalate and put everyone on board at serious risk. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your senior cabin crew member speaking. We are experiencing a technical issue and will be returning to Heathrow. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The captain, we provide further information shortly. In the meantime, ATC vectored the aircraft towards the Lambourne holding area. The senior cabin crew member took another look at the engines. She now saw that the left engine was also damaged, and with this information she contacted the cockpit again. "Captain, I've just checked again. The left engine cowling is missing. As well, when the cowling from the right engine came off, it struck the right over W.I. Eimer emergency exit. Both engines, you're sure? Yes, both engines have cowling damage, understood. We'll proceed. Stay alert. I'll update you shortly after reviewing the situation. The pilots were briefed for a landing on runway 27, right as 27 left had been closed due to debris lying on the surface. Large pieces of the fan cowl doors scattered along the area had made it unusable for landing at this point. Flight 762 was still 27 nautical miles east of the airport, and the situation in the cockpit was worsening. As the fuel imbalance alert was activated, the co-pilot immediately identified it as a fuel leak. He was right, but the leak had been occurring for a while without the pilots noticing. While the co-pilot managed this issue, the captain requested vectors to the ILS for runway 27. Right, ATC cleared the aircraft to turn left to intercept the localizer. As the plane began its turn, the captain notified ATC of the suspected fuel leak and reported that they still had 5 tons of fuel on board. He then made an announcement to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to inform you that one of the engine covers has come off and made contact with a door on the aircraft. However, I want to reassure you that both engines are operating normally, and as a precautionary measure, we will be returning to London Heathrow. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened, and the cabin crew will be providing further instructions shortly. Thank you for your cooperation." After his announcement, he made an alert call instructing the senior cabin crew member to come to the flight deck for an emergency brief. The senior cabin crew member, along with a colleague, quickly made her way to the cockpit. The captain told her they would land in about 6 minutes and that the cabin should be prepared for a normal landing. He explained that the aircraft would stop on the runway for inspection. Satisfied with the briefing and clear instructions, the cabin crew returned to the cabin to make final preparations. Moments after they left, the co-pilot calculated that fuel was leaking at a rate of 100 kiloliters every 2 minutes. He shared his concern with the captain that the right engine might shut down from fuel exhaustion. They had a little over 4.0 kilos of fuel remaining, with around 1,000 in the right tank. With this in mind, they prepared for a Config 3 landing and informed ATC of a possible engine shutdown. Then, after a closer look, the co-pilot recalculated the leak rate. It wasn't 100 kg every 2 minutes, it was 100 kilos every minute. This sudden realization changed everything, making the situation far more urgent. He strongly suggested shutting down the right engine to prevent an even faster fuel loss. But the captain, considering all options, decided against it. Minutes later, the aircraft was established on the ILS localizer 14.7 nautical miles from touchdown at an altitude of 4,000 ft with flaps to selected. Despite the numerous issues the aircraft was facing, it seemed like they were on track for a safe landing until everything changed. A sudden loud bang came from the right engine, followed by a sharp drop in its parameters. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the captain acted instantly, shutting it down. But just as he did, the fire of alarm sounded in the cockpit, signaling a new threat. Fuel from the punctured spill return pipe had ignited, sparking an external fire in the cabin. Passengers were shocked by the sudden bang and the sight of flames coming from the right engine. Panic spread quickly, with some passengers screaming and others looking out of the windows to understand what was happening back. In the cockpit, the crew acted fast discharge, charging the first fire extinguisher bottle with the engine no longer operational and a fire still smoldering. The aircraft was now in a critical position, the left engine, which had remained functional throughout the flight, was now the only source of power keeping the plane in the air. The fate of everyone on board rested on this single engine as they raced against time toward Heathrow Airport seconds after they discharged the extinguisher. Autopilot disconnected Ed, forcing the co-pilot to take manual control of the aircraft. Realizing the severity of their situation, the captain immediately transmitted a mayday to air traffic control, signaling the emergency on board. Mayday, mayday. Mayday, this is British Airways 762. We have a fuel leak and engine issues. We are planning to land at Heathrow but may need to go around. He then lowered the landing gear and discharged the second fire extinguisher bottle, hoping to contain the flames. But the fire warning remained active. Turning to the co-pilot, the captain stated that this landing had to succeed. There would be no second chance with flaps 3 set. He took control of the aircraft at 500 ft, about 1.4 nautical miles from touchdown. He instructed the co-pilot to adjust the thrust levers to manage their speed, while he focused on the landing in the cabin. Fear had taken hold of the passengers. The heavy vibration of the plane and the faint smell of smoke added to the tension. Some passengers sat frozen in their seats, while others quietly whispered prayers, gripping the armrests and seatbelts tightly. The anxiety was palpable as the plane neared the runway, and then at 7:44, British Airways Flight 762 touched down on the runway. As the wheels hit the tarmac, the co-pilot immediately applied reverse thrust on the left engine. Due to the earlier hydraulic failure, the aircraft's braking system required the captain to use manual braking. This ultimately caused the right main gear tire to burst. British Airways 762 flames. Visible from your right engine, winds are 29 degrees at 13s. Despite the challenging circumstances, the aircraft stopped safely. The captain positioned the plane so that the wind would carry the flames away from the fuselage, minimizing the risk to the passengers. Emergency services, already on standby, rushed to the scene to extinguish the fire and assist with the evacuation. The airport fire and rescue service successfully extinguished the fire in the right engine, and the crew initiated an evacuation on the left side of the aircraft. All passengers were safely evacuated without any serious injuries. The Air Accidents Investigation Branch found that the primary cause of the incident was maintenance technicians failing to properly secure the fan cowl doors. After overnight checks, they did not follow correct latching procedures, and inspections by the pushback tug driver and co-pilot missed. The unsecured doors, the design of the fan-cooled door latches also contributed to the issue. Positioned at the bottom of the engine nacelle, they were difficult to see during standard walk-around inspections, and the absence of high-visibility paint on the latches further decreased their visibility. In response, British Airways and Airbus implemented safety measures, revising maintenance procedures to ensure proper securing of fan cowl doors and modifying latch designs for better visibility. New training programs for ground handling staff and flight crews were also introduced to enhance hazard detection before departure. Despite the severe damage to the aircraft, the flight crew and the emergency services' quick actions ensured no fatalities. or serious injuries.